People were blown away with how much of a difference just having a Matterport scan on their site has made to their stats.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Matterpod. Today, we are joined by Brit Adgie from Adgie Images. She has been doing virtual tours for a few years now, but also provides other services in the space as well. So we're super grateful for Brit taking the time to join us and provide some insights this week for our Matterport audience. So thanks so much for being here, Brit, today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So if you want to take a second, Brit, and just go ahead and introduce yourself and Adgie Images, maybe tell us a little bit about what types of services you offer and maybe how you got introduced to the virtual tour world.
Absolutely. So I've always been interested in technology. My background is really audio engineering and kind of from a musical standpoint. And I was doing a lot of stuff with live shows. And as we all know, the pandemic kind of destroyed all that stuff pretty instantly, right? So I was looking to pivot, and I was doing a lot of research on VR and kind of where the future was going to kind of go with that stuff. And Matterport just seemed so promising, particularly with the pandemic. I mean, if it was like a need. And I started this business and essentially immediately got clients from the pandemic. Mostly we kind of started in senior livings because it was a place that was barred off from people visiting. I mean, they had some of the strictest restrictions during the pandemic, and so it was a necessity for a lot of these clients. And from there, we introduced a lot of video aspects. I do a lot of commercials and snippets. We're all commercially licensed drone pilots, which I feel like that's pretty common for a lot of Matterport people, that they pair it with drone and kind of explore the 3D realm with drone, which is really cool. So we kind of started this business, and now we're just like a full-fledged media company. So
Cool. What has been the response? Obviously, COVID created a need for virtual tours like you're describing, with restrictions on people entering buildings, especially senior people that might have certain health conditions. But what has the demand been like for these virtual tours post-COVID?
Yeah, less. I've definitely seen a more of a spike in our other services. In general, we try to go after clients that need all of our services. That's obviously the best business practice for us. So senior livings are still a very big target for us, but less clients that just want Matterport from me personally. I think it's trying to convince them that they need to change their entire marketing strategy and adopt the Matterport way, because a lot of people get really scared off by that monthly recurrence that happens with Matterport. And it's really, if you're talking with a big enough company, they have to, say, hey, we want to have this long-term investment and see multiple benefits from it, not just the marketing side, but also the functional side.
Interesting. You mentioned something that I want to dive into a little bit deeper. You said sometimes clients get scared away by the monthly recurring Matterport hosting fee. So when you work with clients, do you typically require them to set up their own Matterport accounts, or do you typically host those tours for them and build those fees into the price that you charge them?
It's a great question. We always try to come from a place with every decision that we recommend to our clients comes from a place of integrity, just like really what is really the best solution for them. Obviously, I want their business, but that is just something that we really take into consideration. So for a lot of my clients, I really think it's better for them to host their own. In the long run, I've had clients that have had me rescan because the company that they use went out of business, or their scan just kind of disappeared. And for some of these larger, or like, I'm not talking about a Verizon, I'm talking about more of like a mid-sized small company. It's good for them to have control of their own assets and just use me as a collaborator. So normally that is what I recommend. But if they're really small, then obviously it makes more sense financially for them to just host through me. So it kind of depends on the size and what they're trying to do with the scans long term.
I love that concept of giving them the optionality of what they want to do. And it really, if you do give them optionality, I think what you said, it shows integrity that hey, really, we're just here trying to provide you whatever solution works best for you. And if you give them the option to say, if you want to control your own assets and not be at the mercy of, heaven forbid, Adgie Images goes out of business, then we would recommend you host your own Matterport tours yourself. But if you want us to host them on your behalf, then we're happy to do it for increasing the price of our services by X number of dollars. So I think that that's really cool. You mentioned that you are a commercially licensed drone pilot, but I'd love to hear, what are some of the other services that you offer that maybe provide you a way to get your foot in the door with a client to maybe upsell them or sell them Matterport services in addition to some of the other services that you provide?
Absolutely. A lot of our other services are focused around video. So commercials, we do a lot of testimonials. That is a really big one because it kind of works across all business types. You know, obviously it's great in senior livings to hear from people that live there, but really most businesses need some sort of visual testimonial as opposed to written. It's been shown that having video on your website can increase your the amount of time people spend on their site by 30%. So having more engaging content on your website, once I get them in the door with video, then we talk about Matterport because it's like, hey, okay, well, let's keep them on there longer. You know, that's always what we're trying to do is the longer that they can stay on your site, the longer that they will remember that product or service or company. And with a lot of these, you know, we'll go back to senior livings, but it works across all industries. A lot of people's websites are really outdated. And trying to convince them that they need to spend money in marketing is can be challenging, but it's essential because when I look at someone, I'm in my mid-30s, when I go to someone's website, if they have a bad website, I almost immediately eliminate them as an option. Really, it's that important to have to take it seriously as and you're representing yourself online. So if you don't care about your website, then to me it says a lot about your product or service. So
totally. Whenever I go to a website, whether that's some sort of software that I'm looking to use or just in general, if I can see somewhere quickly that there's a video of somebody talking and explaining, I'll definitely click on that before I'll go and try and start reading everything to understand what the product is or whatever type of service I'm looking at. So like you said, I think video is crucial. And then what I love about what you guys do at Adgie Images is coupling the video that you create with the actual Matterport virtual tour. So I know that when you initially started using Open House that you would layer a video on top of the Matterport tour itself of somebody explaining what they were looking at and telling them how to navigate the tour. And it's just a lot more of a romantic, engaging experience if you have some type of video element that a tour viewer can listen to and, you know, watch in the corner as they are walking around those virtual tour experiences. And so I think it's obvious that both the video and the virtual tour can go hand in hand. So I think it's way smart that you don't only just offer virtual tour services, but also video, maybe even video first, and then it's easier to sell Matterport on top of video.
Well, and having a customized product like that, you know, like obviously Matterport's great, but it does differentiate us between, like, why would they not just use Matterport? You know what I mean? That's been a big challenge for a lot of Matterport service providers is, you know, Matterport's kind of competing with us for some of these bigger contracts. So having those additional services also make you more appealing to clients because you can offer things that Matterport can't. And really the embedding of that video within Open House was out of necessity because, again, when we're talking about that senior generation, you know, they struggle with technology. And Matterport to me is such an amazing tool and it's so great. But one thing that it really lacks is navigational tools that make it easy for even people of my generation. You know, unless you're familiar with Matterport, it's not always easy to use. And having Open House with the menu options that you can do and then embedding videos for each specific room, giving instructions on how to use the tour in the beginning, it was really a game changer. And we're still testing stats with, I have a test client who's done it for 5 locations, and I'm excited to see in 6 months, like, how more engaging it is than just the regular tour.
Yeah, I agree. It's important, like you mentioned, for Matterport providers to do what they can to differentiate themselves, because especially with the acquisition of VHT Studios and Matterport basically offering scanning services at really, really cheap prices, there has to be a way for Matterport providers to, sell additional services or differentiate themselves from somebody just saying, hey, well, why don't I just go to Matterport.com and order a scan for $250? Like, you're charging me way more than that. And so I think adding those additional services that the client doesn't really want to get into themselves, it's not their bread and butter to create video content or to go in and add branding to a virtual tour. So offering those services for them, I think at a premium makes total sense. But one question I have for you, Brit, is aside from just doing the scan, like once you do the scan for the client, do you help with implementation as well? So helping them, distribute or embed the experience on their website and show them this is the best way to drive traffic to this experience, and this is where you should share it? Or do you just simply create the experience, whether it's Matterport, open house links, whatever, and then give it to them? What does the process look like after you've kind of finished creating the final product?
Well, I do try to stay in my lane a little bit. When it comes to some of the marketing aspects of, like, where is it best on the website and what's the best way to, adjust your SEO so people will look for this, that I normally direct them to someone who is more marketing focused. But I do, for all of my clients, after we do a scan, everything's complete, we do a 30-minute training, if longer if they need it, because the biggest thing for me is I need them to understand how to use it as a sales tool. Because a lot of the people that we're using, for commercial spaces, senior livings, realtors, they need to know how to use the tour correctly. And so taking them through a demo, showing them how to look up the stats, showing them the best way to share it, as far as like even adding the taglines at the end of the web address so it will autoplay into the highlight reel or whatever they need it to have. It's just important that they understand how powerful a tool it is. But they only know that if they know how to use all the tools, and there's a lot of people within like commercial real estate that didn't even know that there's a measuring tool on there. So just like even just going through simple Matterport instructions, like you forget how easy that is because we're in the world all day long. But for people that only see a scan every couple of months, it's kind of a newer thing to them. So,
and if you don't take the time to teach them how to use the tool, then chances are after you create it and give it to them, they're going to think, well, that was kind of a cool thing, but it didn't really benefit us, or we didn't see the ROI on it that we expected to. So when it comes to them wanting to come to you again to create another experience, they're probably going to say, no, probably like that was cool, but it's not a must-have. It's more of a nice-to-have type of a thing. So I think taking the time to teach, obviously, the benefit and how to use these tours is crucial. One thing is, you mentioned that you're doing kind of some testing with a client that has 5 locations to see kind of what the results are. How are you going about testing it with them, and what are the metrics that you're trying to show them to so they can see whether or not it's something that is actually benefiting them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we compare it through the Matterport stats that they have on, embedded directly through the scan. Because I think for this client, I've done 40 locations. So we've got a lot of data before we added this. We also have data before we converted it to the open house platform. So for, I think, a few of these, they were live on their site for over a year. So we have pretty good data of how it changed their website. And so then looking at their website data and say, okay, how long do people stay on the site? Has my bounce rate, has it decreased? Has how long are they staying engaged in the scan? And then with Open House, you guys have stats built in, like, hey, did they click on this? What rooms did they visit? Like, what is becoming most engaging for them within the tour? And I think that that's cool because you can't see all that stuff through Matterport, very specific stuff like that. So
interesting. So you're comparing what the engagement was like with just the standard Matterport embed versus what it looks like if we add the Open House elements on top of it.
Yeah, and then comparing it to before they even added Matterport and then before they added video. So I did a presentation for, one of my clients. It's been a really, really great relationship. They've really embraced every aspect of the technology that we're bringing to them. So much so that we're now using like Oculus headsets to do virtual tours of their senior living so they can take them to doctors' offices. Because doctors, they have a tight schedule. They're not going to come visit a senior living to see if they recommend that as a place. So their sales team has been taking the Matterport tour out to doctors' offices and conferences using the Oculus.
Interesting.
So they had me come out to their kind of big jamboree that they have. It's like 250 sales and marketing people for their company. And I presented a stats of all their Matterport scans, and people were blown away with how much of a difference just having a Matterport scan on their site has made to their stats.
Again, it's teaching and showing if you utilize this, then these will be, or this is the result. And you have to teach them how to utilize it properly, first of all, and then be able to provide them with the metrics afterwards to show them like, hey, this was something that provided a lot of value for you. When you are looking at things in the future, you should definitely consider creating Matterport tours of whatever office or whatever type of space that you're trying to sell or drive traffic to. So that's awesome. Well, we need to do a follow-up podcast with you in 6 months so that we can hear the results, because I'm super curious, personally, obviously for personal reasons, but I'm curious to hear what the results were of how the no Matterport versus standard Matterport versus Open House stacks up. So stay tuned on the results there. But Brit, we don't have that much more time, but one last question I have for you before we wrap up is, what is a piece of advice that you would give somebody who is new to the Matterport world, maybe just starting out and is trying to kind of get going, find new clients? If you could talk to your past self when you kind of got started, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say, obviously you need to come from a place of, for every business, it's what's in it for me. Why am I paying you money to do this? And so sometimes I think when we see new technology, it's like, oh my gosh, wow, that's so cool. Especially if you're a tech head, wow, that's so cool that it does that. But for the client, it is, well, how does that help me increase sales? Or how does that increase visibility? Like, you need to find out what problem are they looking to solve, and then use your tools in your toolbox to solve it for them. And if you can't do that, then you're in the wrong field or you're pitching to the wrong client. And I wish I would have really realized that, because, real estate's obviously a very common industry, but it's obviously saturated. That's what Matterport's going after. Most people who are in Matterport are in that sector. And so if you want to branch off into other aspects and use Matterport and its technology, and it has so many uses, if you want to pitch to new clients, you got to figure out what the real benefit is to them, not just because it's cool technology.
I love it. I think it's hard to do that, especially at first, because it's so easy to go to them and be like, look at how cool this is. Don't you think you should have a virtual tour of this space? And they're kind of like, yeah, this is cool, but I don't know if I want to spend money on creating something like this. And so the angle that you have to take is definitely, if you create this, it will increase sales by this amount, or the amount of view time on your website where people are taking a look at your store or your showroom or whatever will go up by X percentage. And so you have to be really good at being analytics first, or showing, ROI right out of the gate, rather than just being like, don't you think this is so awesome? You should want to do something like this, right?
Well, and it's I feel like at first it's hard to do that because you don't necessarily have the numbers. So I think also finding a network group or people that you can kind of trust that you're not directly competing with,
Yep.
that can help provide those numbers for you. There's a lot of people out there that are willing to help if you're not in their direct market. You know, if you're not competing them for business, they're happy to give you some of those numbers. So finding people that you can kind of get feedback on and just, you know, kind of work on networking groups online, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Have you found a group, Brit, that's been helpful for you when you have had questions that come up, or whether if you are looking for certain stats or analytics that maybe you don't have? Is there what has been the best way for you to go about finding that information?
Yeah. So when I first started my business, one of the first things I did is me and my husband talked about, okay, we just need to do everything the correct way, right? You know, like have an accountant, get a business coach, like do everything, because when you start a business, you have skills, which is why you're doing this, but you don't have skills in every avenue, right? You know, you're not necessarily a finance person and a creative. That's hard to be both for a lot of people. So I got people on my board who had different skills than me and now know my business in and out, and I can bring them ideas about certain, like, hey, I think I'm going to pitch this industry, and they'll bring kind of aspects I hadn't thought about. But in terms of for Matterport specific, you mentioned the We Get Around network. That was a good one for me initially. Dan, the owner, is based out of Atlanta, so that was helpful. And now I'm part of RCE, so Reality Capture Experts, and yeah, both of those have been really useful for just kind of keeping a, you know, my hand on the heartbeat, or whatever that saying is, you know, where we're kind of still in the industry. So
we've worked directly with both Dan from We Get Around Network and Dustin from Reality Capture Experts, and can't recommend both of them enough. They're so amazing at support. Sometimes it's crazy how fast, if I have any question about anything and I send them an email, like literally within a couple hours, they will have a response for you with resources at your disposal. And so I think that's two great places that people can turn to if they do have questions. So I think that's awesome. But Brit, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I think there's been some really awesome nuggets of gold and wisdom that people can take away from this conversation. And so we really appreciate you sharing your experience and your knowledge with our community.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
If people want to reach out to you, Brit, to ask kind of follow-up questions, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
The best way would be my email, which is Brit, BRIT, @AddieImages.com. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to help anyone in the community.
Cool. Thanks so much, Brit. Hopefully we'll have some people reach out with some follow-up questions. So we really appreciate it. Again, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode, and we will catch you all next week.